And I think Whitehead's use of magical realism,
Yes.
the way he weaves these fantastical elements into the narrative,
It's so brilliant.
it really adds this layer of symbolism and allegory that elevates the story
It does.
beyond just a historical account. You're right.
The literal Underground Railroad,
Mm-hmm.
the hidden tunnels, the fantastic...
Welcome to Witter. Who Has Time to Read? The podcast that brings deep dives for busy minds. Listen to AI hosts Jane and Dane and get ready to unpack the world's most captivating books in just a fraction of the time. Whether commuting, working out, or just squeezing in a quick break, we deliver key insights, thought-provoking themes, and takeaways you can carry into your day. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Plus, use our links in the description to purchase this book. Your support helps us bring more engaging book discussions to you. Listen and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Who has time to read? You do, with Witter.
Welcome back to Witter, deep dives for busy minds.
Yeah.
And this month we're, focusing on Black voices for Black History Month.
Absolutely.
And today's journey, I think, takes us into a really interesting, powerful book.
Yeah.
Colson Whitehead's The Underground Railroad.
Oh, yeah. A fantastic choice.
Have you read it?
I have, yeah.
So this is not your typical historical fiction, right?
Right. This is, it's historical fiction, but it also has elements of magical realism and fantasy woven into it.
Right. So it's like he's taking this historical event
Yes.
that we all kind of know about,
Yeah.
on the surface, but then he's really twisting it in a way that forces us to kind of look at it in a new light.
Exactly. And I think one of the things that Whitehead does so brilliantly is he takes this idea of the Underground Railroad that, we all learn about in school as this network of secret routes and safe houses that help enslaved people escape to freedom. And he turns it into something literal.
Wow.
It's a physical subterranean system of tracks and trains.
Okay, so like you said, like almost magical realism, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so it's like he's making this metaphor real.
Yes.
And through it all, we're following Cora,
Yes.
a young woman who escapes a Georgia plantation and navigates this really fantastical and terrifying version of America that Whitehead creates.
Yeah, and Cora's journey is really the heart of the novel. Mm-hmm. But I think to understand her story, we need to go back to her grandmother, Ajari.
Okay.
Ajari is kidnapped from Africa. She's sold numerous times. She faces just unimaginable hardships, and the novel doesn't shy away from the brutality of her experiences.
It's like he doesn't want us to get away from the reality
Exactly.
of what that was really like.
Yeah, the cramped conditions on the slave ships, the casual cruelty of the crew, it's all there on the page.
Right. And I think what struck me was that even amidst all of that horror,
Yes.
Ajari still finds this tiny space to carve out hope.
Yeah.
Her garden,
Yeah.
which is eventually passed down to Cora, it becomes this really powerful symbol of resilience.
Right.
Like this refusal to be completely broken by the system. Absolutely. And it's so fascinating how Whitehead uses this garden to connect Ajari's experience with Cora's, across time and generations.
Right.
And then we also have Cora's mother, Mabel, the only one to successfully escape the Randall plantation before Cora does.
And that kind of haunts Cora, too.
It does.
Right? Like both this desire to be free, but also this resentment for being left behind.
Yeah, it's this complicated mix of emotions.
Right. And also, Cora doesn't even know her own birthday.
Right.
Which is such a poignant detail, I thought.
It really speaks to the dehumanizing nature of slavery.
Yeah.
The way it robbed individuals of their identities and reduced them to mere property.
And speaking of the Randall plantation, Whitehead really doesn't hold back in depicting how brutal life was there.
He doesn't.
The threat of violence,
Right.
sexual assault, just this complete lack of agency. It's all laid bare.
Yes, and you really feel the weight of that oppression.
Yes.
The way it seeps into every aspect of their lives.
And it's on this plantation that we meet Caesar, who eventually becomes instrumental in Cora's escape.
Mm-hmm.
What I thought was so interesting about him was that he had tasted freedom.
He had.
Right. He had lived in the North. He had lived as a free man with his family before being recaptured.
Right, and sold south.
That just highlights the precarity of freedom.
Absolutely.
How easily it could be snatched away.
And I think Caesar really embodies this flicker of hope, this belief that escape is possible.
Yes.
Even in the face of such overwhelming odds.
And it's Caesar who introduces Cora to the Underground Railroad.
He does.
Which, as we know, Whitehead reimagines in this really mind-blowing way.
Oh, yeah.
So, can you imagine Cora's shock when she comes across this literal network of tunnels and trains.
Right. It's such a departure from what we typically think of when we hear the Underground Railroad.
Right. I mean, it's a really powerful way, I think, to make us rethink this historical event.
It is.
Like, it makes us realize the ingenuity,
yes,
the bravery, the risks
yeah,
that went into creating this real Underground Railroad.
and the sheer scale of it.
Right.
I mean, the fact that this network existed at all is a testament to the power of human resilience and the unyielding desire for freedom.
And as Cora embarks on her journey through this like subterranean world, she encounters this whole cast of characters
She does.
who keep this railroad running.
Right. We have the eccentric station agent, Lumbley, with his barn full of shackles, a very stark reminder of the past these passengers are escaping.
Right.
We have the young, inexperienced engineer who drives the trains, and then we have the abolitionist shopkeeper, Fletcher, who risks his life to help runaways.
And they're all like from such different walks of life.
Exactly.
And I think it really emphasizes how this fight for freedom was a collective effort,
Yes.
with people from different backgrounds, both black and white, risking everything to help others escape slavery.
And Cora's journey through this fantastical underground world becomes this microcosm of her larger journey towards self-discovery
Oh, wow.
and freedom.
I like that.
In each state that she travels through, from South Carolina to North Carolina to Tennessee, presents its own set of challenges and horrors.
Right, so it's not just a physical journey.
It's
also a psychological one,
It is.
where Cora is dealing with this trauma from her past, this constant fear of being recaptured, and then the difficulty of trusting other people.
Right. She's constantly on edge, never knowing who to believe or where to turn.
It's really heartbreaking, I thought, to see how this journey really wears on her
It is.
and forces her to confront not only the external forces of oppression, but also her own internal struggles with fear and doubt and this longing for freedom that always seems just out of reach.
And it really makes you think about the incredible strength and resilience it took to not only survive, but to keep fighting for a better future.
And just when it seems like Cora might find a moment of peace,
Yeah.
Whitehead introduces us to Ridgway,
Oh, yes.
this relentless slave catcher who's like her shadow.
He's like this embodiment of the system that seeks to recapture and control her.
I found him so chilling
He's a terrifying character.
because he's so methodical and relentless, and he's driven by this really twisted ideology that justifies slavery.
Yeah, and his pursuit of Cora, this cat and mouse chase across states, it really adds this layer of suspense and danger to the story.
Right, and the fact that he's connected to Cora's past in a way that we find out later
Yes.
adds this whole other layer of complexity to their dynamic.
Absolutely. It's like this constant game of pursuit and evasion that highlights the pervasive power dynamics at play.
And Ridgway, in a sense, represents that long reach of slavery.
It does.
The way it kind of infiltrates every aspect of society, even in these so-called free states.
Right. He's like this physical manifestation of the psychological chains that continue to bind Cora even as she escapes the physical ones.
And his presence in the book, I think, really emphasizes that freedom is not a destination. It's a constant struggle.
Absolutely.
And it's not just, a physical struggle. It's this mental and emotional battle as well.
Exactly. And I think one of the things that Whitehead does so effectively is he uses these larger-than-life characters in this fantastical setting to explore some really real and relevant themes about race and identity and the enduring legacy of slavery in America.
It's so much more than just an escape story.
It is.
It's really a deep dive into the human cost of slavery,
Yes.
the psychological scars that it left behind, and this ongoing fight for true liberation.
And it really makes you wonder how much has really changed,
Right.
since the time period depicted in the novel.
It's a question that lingers long after you finish the book.
Absolutely.
And it's something that we'll continue to explore as we delve deeper into the Underground Railroad.
Yeah, I'm excited to keep discussing this with you.
Me too.
Yeah, it really makes you think about, the complexities of history and the ways in which the past continues to shape our present.
Because even when Cora gets to, supposedly free states,
Right.
she's still encountering all these different forms of oppression and prejudice.
Exactly.
Like in South Carolina, for example.
Yeah, South Carolina is really interesting.
It seems like it offers black people all these opportunities.
Right on the surface, it seems like a place where they can build a new life.
Right, but then underneath it all,
There's this really sinister system of control. There's forced sterilization. There's these horrific medical experiments that are being conducted on Black bodies.
Like they're still being treated as less than human.
Exactly. It's this chilling reminder that freedom from physical bondage didn't automatically mean freedom from oppression.
Yeah, it's like trading one form of captivity for another.
Right. And then you have North Carolina.
Oh, yeah, North Carolina.
Where Cora encounters this reign of terror.
Enforced by
white writers.
Oh, yeah?
Who violently suppress any attempts to aid runaway slaves.
So scary.
Yeah, the atmosphere there is so heavy with fear and suspicion.
You really get a sense of how precarious Black lives were.
Yeah, even in areas where slavery has been outlawed.
And I thought it was interesting how Whitehead contrasts all these different settings and experiences to highlight how fragmented America's relationship with race and freedom really was.
Yeah, each state represents a different facet of that struggle, a different manifestation of the systemic forces that sought to control and dehumanize Black people.
And it really drives home the point, I think, that the fight for liberation didn't end with the Emancipation Proclamation.
It didn't.
It's like this ongoing battle that requires us to constantly be vigilant and to challenge these systems of oppression.
And it's not just about the external forces of oppression either.
Right.
Whitehead also delves into the internal struggles that characters like Cora are facing.
Right, because she's dealing with so much trauma.
From her past.
She's haunted by nightmares. She has flashbacks.
It's like she can't escape it.
Yeah, it really underscores the deep psychological wounds inflicted by slavery.
And you see her struggling to trust other people.
Right.
And to allow herself to hope.
Because hope can be so dangerous when you've been hurt so many times.
I mean, it makes you think about, how much strength it must take in.
It does.
To not only survive, but to keep fighting for something better.
Cora's internal journey is just as harrowing as her physical one.
It is.
And through her experiences, Whitehead really explores the psychological toll of slavery. The way it fractured families, eroded trust, and instilled this deep-seated sense of fear and vulnerability.
And I think, even today as we grapple with the legacies of slavery and the ongoing fight for racial justice,
absolutely,
these are questions that I think still resonate.
They do.
How do you heal from that kind of trauma?
Right.
How do you reclaim your sense of self and your belief in humanity after enduring those kinds of experiences?
It's a lifelong process.
It is.
And it's not something that you do alone.
And it's not just Cora's story that highlights these complexities.
No, it's not.
Whitehead introduces us to this whole cast of characters.
He does.
Each with their own unique perspective and experiences.
Right, like Bessie, for example.
Oh, yeah.
Bessie.
She escapes to freedom in North Carolina, and she finds work as a domestic servant.
Right.
But even in freedom, she's still facing all these limitations and societal barriers.
Right, like she's living in this predominantly white town.
Yes.
Where opportunities are still largely defined by race.
Her story really exposes the limitations of legal emancipation.
Yeah.
Freedom from physical bondage didn't automatically grant access to economic or social equality.
Right. It's like freedom on paper, but not freedom in reality.
Exactly. And it highlights this ongoing struggle for true liberation.
Which continues to this day.
It does.
And then there's Ethel.
Oh, Ethel, yeah.
She's a very complex and disturbing character.
She is.
She's married to Martin, the station agent who hides Cora in North Carolina. But she's deeply religious, and she uses her interpretation of the Bible to justify slavery.
It's really unsettling.
It is.
To see how she twists scripture to support a system that's caused so much pain and suffering.
And it just shows how even religion can be used.
It can.
To uphold these oppressive ideologies.
Absolutely.
Her character, I think, really makes us confront.
It does.
The fact that good intentions don't automatically equal moral righteousness.
Yeah. It's not enough to just be well-meaning.
Right.
You have to actively challenge the systems of oppression around you.
And it makes you think about how easily harmful ideologies can be internalized and perpetuated.
Even by the people who are most impacted by them.
And the Underground Railroad doesn't shy away from those uncomfortable truths.
It doesn't.
It makes us confront the ugliness of history, the complicity of individuals, and this enduring legacy of racism that continues to this day. It's definitely not an easy read.
It's not a light read.
But it's a necessary one, I think.
I agree.
Because it shakes us out of our complacency.
It does.
It makes us really examine our own biases and assumptions and acknowledge the ways in which we might be contributing to these systems of oppression.
And amidst all this darkness,
there
are these glimmers of hope.
Yeah.
and resisting.
And I think Whitehead's use of magical realism,
Yes.
the way he weaves these fantastical elements into the narrative,
It's so brilliant.
it really adds this layer of symbolism and allegory that elevates the story
It does.
beyond just a historical account. You're right.
The literal Underground Railroad,
Mm-hmm.
the hidden tunnels, the fantastical landscapes,
It makes it feel so,
otherworldly,
yeah.
but also grounded in reality at the same time.
Yeah, and it's like he's using those elements to capture the surreal nature of slavery
Yes.
and the extraordinary lengths that people went to escape it.
It's like he's saying the reality of slavery was so horrific, so unbelievable, that it requires this element of magical realism to fully capture its essence.
And through this blend of reality and fantasy,
Yes.
he creates this world that's both haunting and hopeful,
Yeah.
where the fight for freedom takes on these mythic proportions.
And he doesn't shy away from the brutality of that fight.
No, he doesn't.
The novel is filled with violence, both physical and psychological. It's a tough read, but an important one,
It is.
because it forces us to confront the raw truth of slavery and its lasting impact.
And I think it's a reminder that we can't afford to sanitize history or try to make it more palatable.
We can't.
We need to face it head on, acknowledge the pain and suffering that it caused,
Yes.
and learn from its mistakes.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that struck me most about the novel was how Whitehead captures the resilience
Yes.
of the human spirit in the face of all this adversity.
It's incredible, isn't it?
It is.
Despite the horrors that they endure, characters like Cora and Caesar, they never give up hope.
It's inspiring.
It is.
And their stories, I think, are a testament to the power of the human spirit,
Yes.
to resist oppression, to persevere in the face of unimaginable cruelty, and to find hope even in the darkest of times.
And it makes you think about the legacy of that struggle, how
Yeah.
it continues to inspire the fight for racial justice today.
And speaking of legacy, I think it's important to acknowledge the impact that this novel has had on literature and on discussions about race in America.
Yeah. The Underground Railroad won the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 2017.
Wow.
And it's been widely acclaimed for its powerful storytelling and thought-provoking themes.
It's become this touchstone for conversations
It has.
about the legacy of slavery and the ongoing fight for racial equality.
And it's a reminder of the power of literature.
Yeah.
To spark dialogue, to challenge our perspectives, and to inspire action.
It makes you realize that stories can really change the world.
They can.
And the Underground Railroad is a prime example of that.
Yeah, it really makes you question, what does it even mean to be free?
Especially when you think about, the historical context of the novel and how these echoes of the past, they still reverberate in our present.
Right. It's a question that continues to challenge us because freedom isn't this static thing.
Right.
It's an ongoing process. It's a constant struggle against these forces that try to, limit our autonomy and our humanity.
And I think the Underground Railroad really forces us to confront those forces head on.
It does.
It doesn't give us any easy answers or solutions. It leaves us with this sense of unease.
Yeah.
This recognition that the fight for justice is far from over.
Right. And it challenges us to look inward,
Yeah.
To examine our own complicity, to ask ourselves, how are we contributing to systems of oppression?
Even unintentionally.
Even unintentionally. And it reminds us that the fight for equality requires this constant vigilance,
Right.
a willingness to challenge the status quo, and a commitment to dismantling, these structures of power that just perpetuate injustice.
And I think one of the most powerful takeaways from the novel is this idea of empathy and understanding.
Absolutely.
To really grasp the impact of slavery and its legacy, we need to be listening to the voices of those who live through it.
Yes.
Those who continue to be affected by its echoes.
Right. We need to try to see the world through their eyes.
To really understand those historical and systemic forces that have shaped their realities.
And that's where books like The Underground Railroad, I think, can be so crucial.
Yeah.
They offer us this window into experiences that might be completely different from our own.
Right. And challenge our assumptions.
Yeah.
And broaden our perspectives.
Absolutely.
And while the novel is, obviously rooted in the past.
Yeah.
It also speaks to our present.
It does.
Right? It reminds us that this fight for racial justice is ongoing.
Yes.
That the legacies of slavery continue to shape our society in really profound ways.
Right. And it highlights the need for us to keep having these conversations.
Yeah.
These open and honest conversations about race, about power, about privilege.
We can't shy away from these difficult conversations.
No, we can't.
We need to engage with them.
Yes.
Listen with open hearts and minds and commit ourselves to creating a more just and equitable world.
Exactly.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into the Underground Railroad,
Yeah.
I'm left with this, sense of both heaviness and hope.
Yeah.
Heaviness for the atrocities of the past and the ways in which they continue to affect our present.
Right.
But also this hope for the possibility of a better future.
And I think a recognition that we all have a role to play
We do.
in shaping that future. By engaging with stories like Cora's, by listening to Black voices, by challenging injustice wherever we see it, we can contribute to this ongoing fight for liberation.
The Underground Railroad is a powerful testament, I think,
Yes.
to the resilience of the human spirit
Absolutely.
and a reminder that the work is far from over.
It's not done.
So what resonated most with you
Yeah.
from Cora's journey? What will you explore next, and how will you contribute to the ongoing conversation about race and equality? Thanks for joining us on Witter, Deep Dives for Busy Minds.
Thanks for listening to Witter, Who Has Time to Read, produced by One Media. Please support the author by purchasing the book or audiobook using the link in the description. It's a great way to help keep the art of writing alive. And stay in the loop. Subscribe to our newsletter for updates on weekly deep dives. And don't forget to share your thoughts or suggest our next deep dive at witterpodcast@gmail.com.